There we go. Okay. Looks like we got it pretty balanced. Well, thank you, media, for participating in this press conference. Obviously, everyone's been waiting for these results to come out. The industry's been waiting impatiently. We've been waiting impatiently, but bottom line is there was a job to be done, and it finally got done. So let me just start off by doing some formal introductions. To my right, I have Commissioner or Chairman of the Racing Commission, Mr. Billy G. Smith. To my left, I have our in-house counsel, Mr. Richard Bustamante. They play a pivotal role in the operation here at the Racing Commission, so we appreciate both of them and their support. But my name's Izzy Trejo, the Executive Director of the New Mexico Racing Commission, and I just wanted to start out by thanking the Commission staff, the commissioners, for all their hard work. We're a small agency with a very big job, and when things like this develop, it somewhat puts a smile on our face that the due diligence has been successful. I also want to thank the industry stakeholders. A lot of them are on Zoom. All 5 New Mexico racetracks, Ruidoso Downs, Zia Park, Sunland Park, Sunray Park, and the Downs at Albuquerque for supporting the Racing Commission in all our endeavors. We also want to thank the fans, the participants or licensees that play the game clean. We appreciate that. It makes our job a lot easier. And let's start out telling you a little bit about the Racing Commission. Our statutory mission is and mandates of the NMRC is to administratively regulate horse racing in the state of New Mexico. And we do that for the benefit of the wagering public and to protect the horse and their welfare. As a lot of you know, over the years that have followed the Racing Commission, cornerstone of our regulation is drug testing. The commission's been focused in my 9 years with the agency since 2016 to focus on drug testing. We feel that that is the first and foremost form of us protecting the racehorse.
You wanted to listen.
How did you get in?
I'm part of the media. Oh, everybody that they allowed in looks like media people.
All right, hold on a second.
Okay.
You want to listen?
Yeah.
All right.
You can't mute them.
I did.
Okay. So the agency's focused hard and steadfast on drug testing over the 9 years that I've been here. Every day we chase. It's the proverbial cat and mouse game. It's difficult sometimes for our laboratories to try to detect a drug when there's thousands and thousands and thousands of drugs. And in this case that we're going to be discussing here shortly, we found something fairly significant on a significant race day. So let's get to the matter at hand that we've all been waiting for. On September 2nd, 2024, the All-American Futurity and the undercard races were run at the Downs at Albuquerque due to the natural disasters that occurred in Ruidoso. So basically the Ruidoso race meet was relocated and we ran the races at the Downs at Albuquerque. On September 2nd, we ran the All-American Futurity. It is the Kentucky Derby of quarter horse racing. It is one day that the fans come out, support horse racing in a big way. And we gave over $5 million in purses away that day. So there was a lot of money on the line. So now I think here's where we get into the weeds a bit. We finally got the drug testing results back from Industrial Laboratory, our official laboratory in Colorado. And it's been a long time coming, but unfortunately for some people, but fortunately for the good guys in the industry, we had some adverse analytical findings. And you may hear me use that term, adverse analytical findings. That means something's wrong. That means something was detected in the samples that were tested at our official laboratory in Colorado. Unfortunately, fortunately, we had over 12 violations on this big day in big money races. And the drug that was found in all 12 samples was one that was recently found in other jurisdictions. It's called carmoterol. Carmoterol is a beta agonist drug, which has long-lasting effects that was up for approval by the FDA several years ago, but was not approved. So these poor innocent horses are being administered these illicit drugs to try to get an unfair advantage in our big races. And it was this commission's duty and job to try to discover that. With the help of our laboratory, it's come to a conclusion. As I mentioned, drugs were found in these horses. And we're very confident in our laboratory, and we have to applaud them for doing the due diligence to figure out what in the world these horses are getting put into their systems. So this is like I said earlier, the proverbial cat and mouse game that's played, with us chasing drugs that we don't know about. Today, the cat has caught the mouse. So what this laboratory detected was 5 or 12 violations throughout the card. And I'll give you a rundown. You guys have a supplemental that I provided there. In the 7th race on September 2nd at the Downs at Albuquerque, the All-American Juvenile, the first, second, and third place horses were found with adverse analytical findings of carmoterol in their system. And it spread amongst 2 trainers, Toby Keaton and Mr. Heath Taylor. In the 10th race on that day, the All-American Derby, a race that was worth over $1 million. And this is unprecedented in my time of being in racing my whole life. The first, second, third, and fourth place finishers were found with adverse analytical findings of carmoterol. The trainers of those horses, the top 3 were Toby Keaton's horses. The fourth place finisher, the Marksman V, was trained by a gentleman named Heath Taylor. Going to the 11th race that day, the All-American Futurity, a race worth $3 million. The first, fifth, and sixth place finishers were found with adverse analytical findings. Those horses, once again, the first and fifth place finishers were trained by Toby Keaton. The sixth place finisher trained by Mr. Heath Taylor. In the 12th race of the day, the final race that day, the All-American Gold Cup. We had 2 adverse analytical findings in this race of worth $250,000. And they were the first and second place finishers. Once again, first place finisher trained by Toby Keaton, second place finisher trained by Mr. Heath Taylor. In total, there were 12 findings on that day, 7 with trainer Toby Keaton and 5 by trainer Mr. Heath Taylor. So now what comes up next in the process? The immediate impacts, as of today, all the horses involved in this that I mentioned, they go on what we call a steward's list. That means that these horses cannot run in any licensed jurisdiction in North America until the whole adjudication process has been finalized. So if this gets drug out into district court, and a lot of you guys know how the judicial system works. What do they say? The wheels of justice move slow. We've witnessed that all the time. So these horses could be sitting in their stalls for a couple years. As for the trainers, as of today, Mr. Heath Taylor, Mr. Toby Keaton will be summarily suspended. What does that mean? That means that they can no longer participate in racing in North America in any licensed jurisdiction. They are on the shelf. They are out of business for the time being. As for the owners, they're the ones that own the horses. The horses, as I mentioned, are on the steward's list. They cannot run, so they have a commodity now that cannot earn money for them. And that's part of protecting the betting public and the innocent people of this industry. That's why we do that. That's a strong rule. One of the few jurisdictions in the country that do that is New Mexico, and we're proud to utilize this rule. So the next steps are all these people are going to be provided their administrative disciplinary process. What that means is due process begins. They will be afforded all rights of any individual based on the Constitution, such as a right to legal counsel, right to a fair hearing, right to cross-examine witnesses, and right to provide witnesses. So that process will start with the summary suspension hearing within 10 days pursuant to the New Mexico Administrative Codes. And after that, if they decide to send what we call a split sample, which is another sample that we have of that horse from that same race day that's sitting at the SLD laboratories locked up, these horsemen have the opportunity to send that sample to get tested for confirmation. In my long years in horse racing, I've never seen one come back any different than the confirmation, their official laboratories findings. So, but that is their right to do that. So we'll see if they take advantage of that or not, but we don't know that at this time. Once the due process goes into place and they have their administrative hearing before our board of stewards at each racetrack, that board will levy the sanctions. In some of these cases with this many violations, the sanctions can be over $500,000 over 30 years of a suspension of their license and revocation. So this could be career changing for these people. But we don't know that yet. I don't want to get too far ahead because they still have to go through the process, and it'll be up to the New Mexico Racing Commission's 3 stewards to determine what kind of sanctions these people will be facing. But at this point in time, we'll also add that they have the right to appeal those to the district court. And a lot of times that's the course that these types of activities go, unfortunately, and that prolongs the whole process. We also want to add that the purses of these horses will be put on hold. They will not be disseminated, but anyone that was not involved in the findings, those purses are being released as of today. So they will be able to get their money. We've been holding a lot of money, over probably $5 million in purses we've been holding. So now some of it's ready to flow, but not all of it. Horses involved in this, we are holding those purses until the adjudication process runs its course. And at this point in time, we'll be prepared to answer any questions, but let me preface that with, due to the high likeliness that this could go into litigation, some questions we may not be able to answer at this point in time, and we apologize in advance. But I know some of you have questions, and we'll do some one-on-ones after this. But at this point in time, does any of the local media have any questions that they want to ask right now, or do you prefer to wait for the afterwards?
Do it now, Fred.
Yeah, I have go ahead. What were some of the red flags that you all noticed? I know that we had some footage when we were there at the race that day of one of the horses being lethargic afterwards. What were some red flags? Was the horse's behavior normal? Was the trainers and jockeys' behavior kind of normal?
Well, that's a good question. I think we could base some of what we're thinking on the actions of the horses after some of the races. The All-American Futurity specifically, I think the whole world saw a horse that looked like it was somewhat in distress. It caught the concerns of our regulatory veterinarians. It caught the concerns of a lot of race fans. The agency has taken in some phone calls from concerned people in the industry and out of the industry. What was going on with the horse? Great question.
And then as far as trainers, we know, they're facing some bans of some sort. Are jockeys also, kind of on pause for a little bit after this situation?
No, but the jockey's penalty would be they typically get 10% or a portion of the winnings. So one jockey in particular stands to lose a lot of money. I believe he won 4 or 5 races that day, probably over $200,000 in his portion of the winnings. So unfortunately, at this point in time, that money's going to be on hold. I don't want to guess that it's going to lose it because we haven't gone through the adjudicatory process.
Once you go through that process, for example, in the 7th race, you have the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place finishers who, I think in our words, tested positive for some sort of banned drug. Once that process happens and they're found guilty, does the 4th, 5th, and place finisher now get put to 1st, 2nd, and 3rd and win that purse money, or how does this work in the horse world?
You're absolutely right. You're a very quick student, Sasha. That's exactly what happens. 4th place would move up to 1st, 5th to 2nd, and so on and so on.
Can you talk a little bit more about the drug found and how it's used to enhance the horse's performance and side effects? You mentioned like the lethargy in the horse afterwards.
Carmoterol is obviously new on the scene. It's the first time we've detected it. It's recently been detected in California and Texas as well. It's a beta agonist. What we believe it would be used for is not as a bronchodilator, in which most beta agonists are used for, such as the same family as clenbuterol, albuterol, and so on. A lot of the drugs that end in O are bronchodilators, and they're used to enhance, improve breathing if used properly. But what we found over the years is that this drug is used and it just has a natural reaction to build muscle. So if you have a horse that has the benefits of being a bigger, stronger horse, competing against horses that have just been eating hay, oats, and water, you could argue that they're going to have an unfair advantage. So that's we believe it's typically used as to build muscle.
Almost like a steroid in humans then?
Good comparison.
You've said you've been the executive director for the commission for 9 years. Have you seen anything like this fall below you in the last 9 years?
This is unprecedented in my whole 53 years in horse racing in any jurisdiction. I've never experienced anything like this. And the chairman's been in this game a lot longer than I have, and I don't know that he's seen anything like that.
The two individuals, Toby and Heath,
Hmm.
Do they know each other or do they work with each other, or are they totally individual doing this individually?
We don't know that. It's difficult. There's over probably 6,000-7,000 licensees under our jurisdiction. It's difficult for us to follow any relationships. Susan?
Can you talk a little bit about how prevalent this is? I mean, all eyes were on the futurity. It's a big race, but in general, overall within the industry here in New Mexico, how much drug induction do we see?
Are you talking about this specific drug, Susan, or
Just overall?
overall? Well, I think the overall big picture, horse racing is regulated very heavily. And I'd like to compare, well, now that you can bet on sports, basketball and football, we're tested way more than those athletes are. We're more transparent than those athletes, than the NBA and the NFL are. And, I could only speak for New Mexico. When I came here, and since we started keeping data in 2017, 3.5% of our samples analyzed were violations. Last year, 2024, and we applaud the intense testing program that we have, is 0.53%. So we've decreased it significantly here. And the family of drugs that we've really been focused on is the beta agonist. And you could see this coming when the state banned albuterol or clenbuterol, they changed to albuterol. When they got rid of albuterol, they went to zilpaterol. From zilpaterol to formoterol, from formoterol to femordorol, and now we got carmoterol. That's a tongue twister there. But anyways, so we would hope, knowing that, and it all started, I believe, when they got rid of steroids many, many years ago. And they found that these beta agonists have a propensity to build muscle. So I think trying to stay ahead of the curve, I think we look at all the beta agonists and, we'll obviously work with our laboratories and give them any information we have to hopefully develop testing standards for drugs that we have not yet caught yet. As you know, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of drugs in this world, and trying to find that needle in a haystack is very difficult. And like I said, today, the cat caught the mouse.
How does this work for betting? Because horse racing is one of the sports that has the highest betting, or most people that do bet. So for the people that bet that day, and if these races are found to be with different standings come after the law processes, do those bettings still stand from that day, or do those all kind of change?
Well, that's a sore spot. That's definitely a sore spot of a question, because the fact of the matter is, and the bottom line truth is, the people that were at the racetrack that day supporting horse racing, putting their hard-earned dollars on these races, they've been cheated. They have in the most bona fide of ways. So this unfortunately does not affect the pari-mutuel payouts. Obviously, we can't do drug testing between the horses finishing the race and the race going official. So that's why the sanctions are very difficult, are very intense on these people, because they not only cheated the other participants in the race, they've cheated the betting public. They went to the racetrack that day and put their hard-earned money on our industry, and we don't take lightly to that. So unfortunately, the payoffs are the payoffs that day.
A question.
this is kind of just a personal insight to just you and your whole thought process with this incident in general. You mentioned before that this drug was on the way to be FDA approved and then it wasn't. So from just your perspective and your experience, what do you think would push these trainers or whoever to use this drug for this race? Again, like, did they just think they weren't going to get caught? Like, you've spoken already how regulated the horses are and how often they get drug tested. So just from your personal perspective, what do you think could have pushed these individuals to put these drugs in these horses? Like, just get that perspective.
Well, not knowing how they tick and talk, my own perspective, without giving it a whole lot of thought, typically is pure and simple selfishness and greed.
Horses did you have racing that day? I know you said 12 had violations, but out of how many horses did you have that day?
There's 12 races, approximately probably average 9 horses per race. I don't have the exact figures, but we do have access to that data. If you need it, I can give you a hard copy.
And Izzy, how do you, tell us a little bit about, the black eye. Is there a black eye, and how does the racing commission, or you, chairman, try to tell folks, this isn't a widespread deal?
Well, that's the difficulty in this type of news. Yes, we can go ahead and pat ourselves on the back and say, job well done. We finally caught a cheater here with a significant finding. But, it's really up to the general public what our social license to continue to operate is. Are they going to be turned off by this? Are they going to say, we can't even go out and bet on horses when all these top finishers cheated? So it's really up to the general public to make that decision. For us, it's a bag of mixed emotions. We're glad we caught this, but we understand that the general public may look adversely to this. And I always use the comparison. If you went to a casino and the roulette wheel was a rigged one, would you go play it? Personally, I'm not going to, and I don't think that a lot of people are going to. So I would think the way the public thinks, if they feel the game is rigged, why are they going to come out and support it? Racing is best when it's played when people are honest and playing it. Quarter horse racing is phenomenal. It's a great event to stand on the rail and watch the horses fly by and see the dirt clouds come and just about hit you. And the power of them animals, they're beautiful animals. And it's unfortunate that these people, for their own gain, would do harm to this industry like that.
Director, looking at this list you gave us, it seems to be 2 trainers, then you have 1 owner whose horse tested positive in the 4 races that you have here. Have you had any issues or concerns with this specific owner or these 2 trainers prior to this race?
It's tough to say. Everyone's a suspect until we get clearances of the samples. So, we hate to think like that, but until these tests come clear from the laboratory, everyone's a suspect.
Are there any plans in the future to try and see if other horses have this drug? I mean, in this case, the trainer told me he had 7 horses that he was training, but I mean, the owner as well. Are there any plans to try and see if they have more horses with this drug?
I know Mr. Keaton hasn't ran a horse since December 2024. We are going to check to see if we have other samples, but they would be from older races, and it would probably be more for informational purposes since those horses have been released. It wasn't until a couple of months ago that we realized there was some intelligence out there that might lead us in this direction.
I guess my question is, to further my question, I'm reading your penalty recommendations here because I don't think any of us are in tune with horse racing. Let me speak for all of us. So if any of these people are found guilty through the law process, can you explain what they may face? I know there is first offense, second offense, third offense, but it doesn't seem like these people have had offenses from you before from what you just stated.
Yeah, I don't recall their past records, but I can tell you the classification for this drug would be what they call a 1A, and those are the penalties that you have before you. So it's the most illicit of drugs, and you face the most heavy sanctions. So the minimum on the first violation is 1 year, absent any mitigating factors. Obviously, I don't want to get too much into the weeds on how the stewards may see this, but for example, if you got the max on the first one, 3 years, then 3 years, and then 5 years. You know, a person with 7 violations is looking at over a 30-year suspension, approximately 31 years, because after the second and third, their license is revoked and cannot reapply for a license for 5 years. So it could be 31 years before that person can say, hey, I'd like to come try to get a license in New Mexico.
So all these would count as individual violations for a reason, at least.
Absolutely.
So just to clarify that, per horse, it would be per violation then?
Per violation, absolutely.
So if they're listed on here multiple times, for example, the 2 trainers, that would be,
It would be 7 for Toby and
7.
I mean, would it be a third lifetime offense because they have more than 3 offenses at that point?
Yes, after the third offense, our rules say that any subsequent violations after the third offense, you handle it with the same sanction as the third violation. So it'd be 5 years multiplied a few times over. So that's where we get the over 31 years.
Okay, so they could be served like consecutively versus concurrently then.
All consecutively.
Can you maybe give a little more insight on the timeline for the drug testing process? Because the race was in September, you know, a couple of months went by, you kind of noticed something fishy and then the results were announced today, like the timeline of the drug testing process.
Yeah, we could touch on that just a hair. Obviously, you know, we've been getting questioned on this quite a bit, but as any investigation, and I said before, do you go to the police and say, hey, why isn't that murder case solved yet? I mean, you've been on it for 2 years. This is an investigation. This is the lab doing its due diligence with information that they got, and they utilized that information and it came to a finding. So time only counts when you're in jail.
And one last question, the samples, were they taken the day of the race or after, once you guys started to notice something may have been off with these races?
Pursuant to the rules, these samples are taken immediately after the race, after the horse has about 30 to 45 minutes to calm down and cool down a little bit and drink some water and gather himself. And then they take the urine and blood samples in there in our testing facilities. And
that's common for every single time you guys race?
Yes, that is correct.
So you guys test all the horses that win, or?
By rule, the winner is the horse that we have to test for sure. And then it's up to our stewards to select which horses are tested.
One of you asked if it's going to hurt the industry. It is. It is going to hurt the industry. A lot of people are getting hurt over this. It changes pedigrees. There's so many things that changes that this is going to be a lasting. We're going to lose some owners. We're going to lose some trainers. We're going to lose some participants. So definitely going to hurt it. It's going to take time for this to heal over. In the end, though, New Mexico's in a great spot. We have bigger purses than any place in the country, as big or bigger. So New Mexico sits in a good spot, but this is nationwide. I think it hurts the industry nationwide, not just New Mexico. It affects every state that has racing.
I guess my last question is, because I don't know any of these trainers' names or horses, are any of them local or are they from scattered kind of all over across the country?
They are not New Mexicans. They are from, I believe one may be from Oklahoma or Texas, and perhaps the other one's from Louisiana.
Okay.
And I know we have media on Zoom, so if the questions are completed, and we can certainly circle back if you need to, but I'd like to get to Felix Chavez with the El Paso Times.
Do you mind if I let Jana Van Bibber in first? She raised her hand first.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Thank you, Director
Janet.
Trejo. Hi, I appreciate the opportunity to listen in on your call, and I would like to add to your reference earlier about social license to operate and to Chairman Smith's reference to hurting the industry. And I'd like to encourage everybody in your audience to focus on the positive of this narrative, that when you consider a moment ago, you reported that 97% of your testing passes cleared without prohibited drugs present, that means we have a small 3% of people that we're trying to govern in our industry. And I commend you for doing your due diligence to make sure that you catch those that are seeking an unfair advantage, and that they are indeed such a small percentage that this is a good story of good news about how you're doing your due diligence and regulation. And I hope that there is some mention of that in the stories that are crafted as a result of your press release. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to comment.
Thanks for your support, Janet. Thank you so much. That's Janet Van Beber with the AQHA, American Quarter Horse Association.
Travis.
All right, Felix, we cannot hear you.
Okay, just to clarify, just officially, I guess he hasn't been stripped of all of the Triple Crown until all the due process, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, just clarifying. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Hey, Steve.
Oh, me too.
1 second. 1 second, Steve.
Yourself.
They said you need to unmute yourself. It's the most common phrase used in the last 2 years, right?
Oh, still can't hear him.
Can you hear me now, please?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I apologize for the delay just then. Just to make sure on the timeline accuracy, when were Taylor and Keaton summarily suspended? Was that today?
Today.
Okay, great. And were there any other tests for September 2nd or are any other tests for September 2nd outstanding?
There are none.
There are none. And was there any veterinarians who were sanctioned? Or are there any veterinarians who might face complaints?
At this point, Steve, we have not got to that point, but I'm of the understanding that the stewards are going to take action against Mr. Taylor's assistant trainer as well.
Okay. And also, now that you've done the summarily suspension and announced these positives, when will there be a hearing? Have you scheduled anything? You might have glanced over that earlier, but I wanted to ask if any dates have been set on hearing dates or even preliminary hearing dates at this stage.
Well, according to the New Mexico Administrative Code, our rules tell us to give a summary suspension hearing within the next 10 days. And typically what happens in these situations that involve drug violations, they'll have that hearing and then just continue that case until we get the results from the split sample laboratories. So we're still waiting. By rule, they have 48 hours, I believe, to inform us if they want to send a split sample. And then from that point forward, we have 7 days to ship that sample pursuant to our rules. So there's going to be a little bit of time in between, but as far as the summary suspension hearing, that will go within 10 days. And like I said, if we don't have the split sample results back, but before that date, which is nearly impossible because split samples typically take, gosh, these days, a few months.
Yeah.
The disciplinary hearing is going to be held probably within a handful of days of us getting the split results back from the split testing laboratory.
And so the industrial labs were the A sample, and do you have any indication of what labs will be used for the B sample?
Pursuant to our rules, the labs that can be used are ones that were approved by the New Mexico Racing Commission, and that would be Pennsylvania, Cal Davis, and Ohio.
Okay. That's good to know. All right, good. Thank you greatly.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Steve. We don't have any more questions here. I know we're going to do some one-on-ones afterwards. I don't know if it's appropriate time for you guys.
More after you answer all of our questions.
You good?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming, and we really appreciate you listening to what's going on in horse racing, and come out to the track one day. It's fun. I guarantee it.